Can your birthday month predict how long you'll live? What if the month you were born could quietly shape how long you live? It sounds like superstition, until you realize the science is starting to say otherwise. Researchers analyzing millions of birth and death records have uncovered something strange. People born in certain months consistently live longer than others. And it's not just one study. From Austria to New York, the data keeps pointing to the same seasonal clues. If you were born in October or November, you might have a slight edge, a built-in advantage that could stretch your lifespan by months, even years. But if your birthday falls in April or May, the statistics shift in a different direction, raising questions that scientists are only beginning to answer. Is it sunlight exposure in the womb? Seasonal viruses? Nutrition? Or something far deeper than we ever imagined? Because as it turns out, the season of your first breath might say more about your future than we ever thought. And that's exactly what scientists set out to uncover. Why scientists study birth month and longevity? For decades, scientists dismissed birth month as nothing more than a calendar quirk, irrelevant in the grand scheme of health and longevity. But as large-scale population data became easier to access, subtle patterns began to emerge. Studies out of Columbia University, the University of Chicago, and even the Max Planck Institute all found the same curious thread: a measurable difference in lifespan and disease risk depending on when a person is born. And we're not talking astrology. This is hard data drawn from hundreds of thousands, even millions, of birth and death records tracked across decades. Patterns that repeat across different populations, cultures, and hemispheres. In one landmark study, researchers combed through over 1.7 million medical records in New York City alone. What they discovered was astonishing. People born in the late fall months, particularly October and November, had lower overall risk for cardiovascular disease and certain respiratory conditions later in life. Meanwhile, those born in the spring showed slightly higher risks for chronic illnesses like diabetes and neurological disorders. Another study looked at more than 1 million people born in Austria between 1981 and 2010. The data revealed that people born in autumn had the highest life expectancy, while those born in spring had the lowest. At first glance, it almost seems like coincidence. But the numbers held, even after adjusting for socioeconomic status, education, and geographic location. So the question became, why? That's when scientists turned their attention to early development, specifically the conditions experienced during pregnancy and the first few months of life. They realized that birth month might not be acting alone. It could be a proxy for the environment a baby is exposed to before and after birth. And this shift in focus changed everything. Because it's not the month itself that matters, it's what that month represents. The amount of sunlight. The presence of seasonal viruses. The availability of nutrients. The temperature. The air quality. All of these subtle factors, occurring during the earliest stages of life, may shape long-term health in ways we're only beginning to understand. And that leads us directly to the next crucial question: what was happening in the environment when you were forming in the womb? Seasonal exposures. Your first environment matters. When scientists began to investigate why birth month might influence longevity, the trail led them not to the date of birth itself, but to the environment surrounding it. Think about it. Your time in the womb and your first few months of life are periods of rapid development. Organs are forming, the brain is wiring itself, and the immune system is being programmed. Any environmental factor during this window, however small, can leave a lasting imprint. One of the biggest factors? Sunlight. More specifically, the amount of UVB exposure a pregnant mother receives, which directly affects her vitamin D levels. Vitamin D plays a crucial role in fetal brain development, immune system calibration, and even gene expression. Babies conceived in winter and born in late summer or early fall typically enjoy higher prenatal vitamin D exposure, while those born in spring may have had gestation periods with less sunlight and lower maternal vitamin D levels. Then there's seasonal nutrition. Before the era of global food supply chains, pregnant women's diets varied with the seasons. Winter pregnancies often meant fewer fresh fruits and vegetables, while summer or fall pregnancies meant better access to micronutrients crucial for fetal growth. Even today, Diet quality can shift subtly with the seasons, especially in regions with food insecurity. Infections are another silent influence. Babies born during spring often develop in utero during the cold months, when flu and respiratory infections are more prevalent. A maternal infection, even one that's mild, can trigger inflammatory responses that affect fetal brain and immune system development. Several studies have linked spring and early summer births with slightly increased risks of schizophrenia, autoimmune disorders, and asthma later in life. Even temperature and air quality can play a role. Exposure to extreme cold or heat, as well as seasonal pollution spikes, can affect fetal development. Add to that factors like allergens, mold exposure, and even seasonal patterns in maternal stress, and it becomes clear, your first environment isn't just a backdrop. It's a blueprint. All of this adds up to one key idea. The season you're born into, and more importantly, the season you gestated in, can shape how resilient or vulnerable your body becomes over a lifetime. Which brings us to an intriguing discovery that's repeated across multiple studies. Babies born in the fall, particularly in September, October, and November, seem to have a measurable edge. But why? The fall baby advantage. Do autumn birthdays really mean longer lives? Among all the findings connecting birth month to long-term health, one trend stands out again and again. Those born in the fall, especially September, October, and November, tend to live longer. In a large-scale study conducted by researchers at the University of Chicago, scientists examined over 1,500 centenarians, people who lived to be 100 or more. What they found was striking. A disproportionate number were born between September and November. The data held even after controlling for gender, ethnicity, and socioeconomic status. Another study published in the Journal of Aging Research found that individuals born in the fall had a significantly lower risk of dying prematurely, and were more likely to reach advanced ages compared to those born in spring or summer. So what makes fall babies different? Researchers believe it comes down to the early life environmental exposures we explored earlier. Babies born in the fall are typically conceived in the winter months, when their mothers are less likely to contract seasonal viruses like influenza. As a result, the developing fetus is exposed to lower levels of inflammation, a factor linked to healthier immune development and reduced risk of chronic disease later in life. Additionally, fall-born infants spend their crucial first months of life in the cooler, cleaner air of autumn and early winter, when allergen levels, humidity, and pollution are typically lower. This may help explain why they show lower rates of asthma and respiratory infections during infancy, which can shape lung and immune system strength for years to come. Their gestation also overlaps with periods of greater sunlight exposure during late spring and summer, potentially providing the mother with higher vitamin D levels and better nutrient availability during key stages of fetal growth. Combined, these factors create a sort of seasonal sweet spot, a biologically advantageous alignment of prenatal and postnatal conditions that supports long-term health. But if fall births carry such potential benefits, what about the other side of the calendar? Because for babies born in spring and summer, the same environmental patterns can shift in less favorable ways, and scientists have uncovered some sobering patterns that deserve just as much attention. Spring and summer births. Why they may carry higher health risks. While fall babies seem to enjoy a seasonal advantage, the data surrounding spring and summer births paints a more complicated picture, one that raises important concerns about early life health risks that can echo across decades. Multiple studies have found that individuals born in April, May, and June face a slightly higher risk of developing chronic conditions like type 1 diabetes, multiple sclerosis, schizophrenia, and even certain cardiovascular issues later in life. Why would a birth month associated with warmth and renewal carry hidden risks? One explanation lies in the timing of prenatal development. Babies born in spring were often conceived in the summer or fall months, precisely when maternal vitamin D levels begin to drop due to decreasing sunlight exposure. Low vitamin D during pregnancy has been linked to impaired fetal immune development, higher inflammation, and increased susceptibility to autoimmune disorders. Additionally, seasonal viral infections play a major role. A fetus developing during the winter months, especially during the second trimester, may be exposed to higher levels of maternal inflammation triggered by influenza or respiratory infections. These immune responses, even when mild, can interfere with neural development, which researchers believe could contribute to increased risks for mental health conditions later in life. Then there's the matter of allergen exposure. Spring and summer babies spend their first months in an environment teeming with pollen, dust mites, and mold spores, potentially increasing the likelihood of early-onset asthma, eczema, or allergic reactions. A baby's immune system, still learning how to distinguish friend from foe, may be overwhelmed during this critical window. Temperature extremes during late pregnancy, particularly excessive summer heat, have also been associated with preterm births, low birth weights, and even developmental complications in utero. Of course, these trends are statistical, not deterministic. Being born in spring or summer doesn't mean you're doomed to poor health. But the evidence does suggest that early environmental challenges may subtly shape the way the body develops and responds to the world. And one of the most critical systems affected by these seasonal exposures is the immune system, our lifelong defense mechanism, intricately tuned during those very first months of life. Immune system programming. Birth month and your body's defense blueprint. One of the most profound ways your birth month may influence your longevity is through the immune system, a complex network that begins forming long before you're born and continues to develop rapidly during infancy. Scientists now understand that the first 1,000 days of life, from conception through a child's second birthday, are critical for shaping how the immune system learns, adapts, and responds to threats. During this period, the body is setting its internal blueprint for what it considers safe, what it fights, and how it heals. Birth season plays a subtle but significant role in this process. Babies born in autumn and early winter, who spend much of their in-womb development during sunny spring and summer months, are exposed to higher maternal vitamin D levels, a key nutrient that supports immune cell regulation and anti-inflammatory processes. This may help explain why fall babies often show stronger immune profiles and lower lifetime risk for autoimmune diseases. In contrast, babies born in spring or early summer are often developing in utero during darker, colder months, when viral infections and inflammation are more likely to affect the mother. Even minor infections during pregnancy can lead to inflammatory signaling that subtly reshapes how the fetus's immune cells develop. Researchers have linked this exposure to a higher risk of immune dysregulation, a potential factor in conditions like asthma, allergies, or even autoimmune diseases such as type 1 diabetes or Crohn's. There's also emerging evidence that gut microbiome colonization, a key part of immune system training, is influenced by the season of birth. Babies born in warmer months may be exposed to a wider diversity of microbes early on, which could be beneficial, or, if coupled with high allergen loads, it might lead to hypersensitivity. Importantly, scientists emphasize that the immune system remains highly adaptable. Lifestyle, diet, exercise, and exposure to diverse environments can reshape immune health throughout life. But what your immune system learns first may create a foundation that lasts a lifetime. Still, birth month is just one piece of the puzzle. Because when researchers zoom out to look at the broader picture, another force rises to the forefront, one that can dramatically influence health, disease, and longevity regardless of what season you were born into. Socioeconomic and cultural biases. Why environment still trumps astrology. As compelling as the science linking birth month to longevity may be, it's crucial to step back and consider a broader truth. Environment and lifestyle far outweigh the influence of any calendar date. Too often, the conversation around birth month drifts into the realm of astrology or pseudoscience. But the real-world drivers of health and lifespan are far more grounded in social, economic, and cultural realities. For example, in many countries, birth trends are not randomly distributed across the year. In wealthier families, parents often time pregnancies to avoid harsh winter months or align with the academic calendar. In contrast, families with fewer resources may have less control over the timing of childbirth, leading to disproportionate birth distributions in certain seasons. Access to prenatal care, nutritious food, and safe living environments during pregnancy can all dramatically alter a child's long-term health, regardless of whether they're born in April or October. A baby born in spring to a mother with excellent health care, strong social support, and good nutrition will likely fare better than a fall-born baby in a high-stress, impoverished setting. Geography matters too. Seasonal patterns differ dramatically between hemispheres and climates. A July baby in Sweden experiences a vastly different early life environment than a July baby in Brazil. This is why scientists are careful to note that birth month effects vary by region, and often fade when you account for socioeconomic disparities. Cultural practices also play a role. In some societies, newborn care routines, breastfeeding customs, or early vaccination schedules differ by season, not because of biology, but because of tradition. All of these can influence a child's development just as powerfully as environmental exposures. So while it's fascinating to explore the biological impacts of birth timing, we must resist the urge to oversimplify or over-personalize these findings. Birth month may set the stage, but life circumstances determine how the story unfolds. Still, the patterns are intriguing. And when we look at some of the longest living individuals in history, we find their birth months often echo the trends science has uncovered, providing real-world faces to the data and deepening the mystery even further. Notable longevity cases by birth month. Statistics and studies can tell us a lot, but sometimes the most compelling evidence comes from real lives, people who defied the odds and lived well beyond 100. And when researchers began examining the birth months of centenarians and supercentenarians, some fascinating patterns began to emerge. In one large-scale study conducted by the University of Chicago, over 1,500 centenarians born between 1880 and 1895 were analyzed. The data showed that those born in September, October, and November were significantly more likely to live to 100 than those born in March, May, or July. These findings echoed across various datasets from Austria, Denmark, and the United States. Some of the world's oldest recorded individuals add intriguing real-world examples to the trend. Jeanne Calment, the Frenchwoman who holds the longest confirmed human lifespan at 122 years, was born in February, which doesn't fit the autumn theory, but she also lived in a warm Mediterranean climate, had access to quality food, and lived an active lifestyle, reminding us that birth month is only one piece of a much larger puzzle. However, other notable cases do align. Sarah Knaus, who lived to 119 and was the oldest American ever recorded, was born in September. Jérôme Kimura, the oldest verified man, born in April, fits into the spring category, showing that while trends exist, exceptions are just as revealing. In his case, a lifelong routine of moderation, hard work, and daily movement seemed to matter more than the season of his birth. It's this blend of biology and behavior that makes each case so compelling. When we look at clusters of longevity among those born in certain months, we start to see patterns, but also the influence of family, location, culture, and daily habits. Birth month may help tilt the odds, but what people do with their lives ultimately defines the outcome. Still, one question lingers. How do those subtle early exposures translate into changes that last a lifetime? The answer may lie deeper than just statistics or anecdotes, deep within ourselves, where epigenetic changes and circadian imprinting silently shape how we age, how we heal, and how long we live. Epigenetics and circadian imprinting. The deeper science. Behind every visible health pattern lies an invisible one, coded not in your DNA, but in how your genes are expressed. This is the realm of epigenetics, the science of how environmental influences can switch genes on or off without changing the genetic code itself. And according to growing research, your birth season may leave an epigenetic signature that lasts a lifetime. During pregnancy and early infancy, your cells are multiplying at incredible speed. This is when your epigenome, essentially, your body's instruction manual, is being written. Factors like sunlight, maternal diet, temperature, and seasonal exposure to pathogens can all influence how genes involved in immune function, metabolism, and even brain development are regulated. A 2015 study published in Nature Communications found that DNA methylation patterns, a key part of epigenetic programming, differed depending on birth month. These methylation changes were linked to increased risks of autoimmune diseases, certain mental health conditions, and even lifespan differences. The body, in a way, remembers the season it was born into, and responds accordingly throughout life. Closely tied to this is circadian imprinting. Our bodies are wired to operate on a 24-hour rhythm, but they also respond to seasonal rhythms, variations in light, temperature, and day length that shift with the calendar. During fetal development, the brain begins syncing with environmental cues, establishing internal clocks that regulate everything from sleep cycles to hormone production to immune responses. This biological clock is calibrated, in part, by the seasonal context of early life. Being born into longer or shorter days, colder or warmer nights, more or less light, all of this subtly imprints on our physiology. Researchers believe this may help explain why certain diseases or health vulnerabilities emerge with different birth months, even decades later. But here's the key. Epigenetic and circadian programming are not fixed destinies. While they set the initial conditions, they can also be modified by lifestyle, habits, and environment over time. The science makes it clear, your birth month may shape your foundation, but it doesn't seal your fate. Which brings us to the part that matters most, the choices you make every day. Because no matter what season you were born in, there are powerful habits that can override the odds and profoundly influence how long and how well you live. What you can control. Healthy habits that override birth month odd. It's easy to look at the data and feel like your birth month stamped you with a fixed fate. But the truth is, your health story is still being written, every single day. While early life exposures and epigenetic programming may set the foundation, it's your lifelong habits that do the real building. And in many cases, these habits have far more power than anything marked on a birth certificate. Take nutrition, for example. A balanced diet rich in fiber, healthy fats, lean proteins, and a variety of fruits and vegetables can reduce inflammation, regulate blood sugar, support gut health, and even reverse some negative epigenetic markers. Regardless of when you were born, what you eat daily has a direct impact on how your body ages. Sleep is another powerful lever. Prioritizing restful, consistent sleep helps regulate your circadian rhythms, those biological clocks that may have been influenced by your birth season, but are also highly adaptable. By syncing your daily routine with natural light cycles, you can support hormone balance, immune function, and mental health. Then there's movement. Regular physical activity, whether it's walking, yoga, resistance training, or dancing, reduces disease risk, boosts mood, and slows the aging process on a cellular level. It even affects how your genes express themselves, influencing your health trajectory in real time. Don't forget the power of social connection and stress management. Chronic stress is one of the most damaging forces to long-term health. But building strong relationships, practicing mindfulness, and finding purpose in daily life can counteract that stress and promote emotional resilience, regardless of your biological starting point. And perhaps most importantly, staying engaged with your health, through regular checkups, screenings, and learning about your body, gives you the tools to act early, adjust course, and take control of your longevity. So while your birth month may offer clues, some advantages, some vulnerabilities, it doesn't define your outcome. You do. Because how long you live is influenced not just by when your story began, but by how you choose to live it. And that brings us to one final truth worth holding onto. So yes, your birth month may whisper something about where you started. It might hint at the season's light, the air your mother breathed, or the subtle timing of your first heartbeat. But it's not a sentence. It's not a ceiling. It's a clue. A small piece of a much larger puzzle, one that's still unfolding with every choice you make, every meal you eat, every night you rest, and every day you move your body forward. Longevity isn't locked in a date, it's shaped in the living. Because no matter when you arrived in this world, what you do with your time here will always matter more. And maybe, just maybe, that's the most hopeful science of all.